if you've always wanted a coupe SUV, then you've also needed to have really deep pockets. That of course is up until now, because Maruti Suzuki are trying their hand out at the coupe SUV or the crossover SUV body style with this, the Fronx.
But yeah, before you ask what the Fronx?
Fronx means the next frontier of SUVs.
So straight from the horse's mouth then, that's what's the Fronx.
Now the Fronx is based on the Baleno, but the outsides, the body panels, they're all new. In fact, it's not just the plastic or the soft bits like the bumper and the headlights, but it's the sheet metal too. In fact, the doors as well are different from the Balenos.
The makeover is really commendable, and it's gunning for the SUV look with that tall bonnet and a very upright nose section. It's also linked to its Nexa stablemate, the Grand Vitara, with the headlights set below and the 3-segmented DRLs above. And finishing off the front is a forced skid plate. At the sides, the doors have a different section to the Baleno, while the rear also gets a stronger character line, and the waistline rises at the back to meet a dipping window line. And this does give it a distinct look.
Also, what you'll probably be able to tell from the sides are the wheel arches. Now, if you look here, there is a big gap, and that's because the ground clearance has been increased from 170 mm, which is on the Baleno, to 190 on the Fronx.
So that's a handy 20 mm extra, and that's been achieved with a raised and a stiffer suspension, as well as a taller profile tyre. Larger ones would have been better though, as they still look dwarfed.
Now at the rear, I think the defining styling element or the signature element for me is the tail light, which stretches all across here. Now that's a popular trend these days across manufacturers, and why not? Maruti have done that as well.
It's also similar to the Grand Vitara with the 3 signature segmented LED lights, and for the requisite SUV character, there is a large stylized skid plate and diffuser that's done in a contrast color. The number plate is also housed on the boot lid. Speaking of which, compared to the Baleno, boot space is down from 318 litres to 308.
Well, as you can see, it's still really large, still pretty deep, and that's one of the things we liked about the Baleno. There's a lot of boot space here. The only bit, of course, is it's deep, so you do have to haul your bags over and in, but otherwise it can swallow a lot. So while Maruti have really reworked the outsides of the car, inside it's very much a Baleno, and that's a good thing because you've got a nice smart looking dash and a whole lot of features as well. So you've got wireless charging down here, you've got climate control with toggle switches, and that's really a good idea. I really like when there are switches rather than a touch panel or a touch screen. Speaking of the touch screen, you've got a 9-inch unit up here, and you also have a 7-inch unit on the lower trims.
There's also the HUD from the Baleno and its flattish steering wheel with buttons, as well as the nice sporty looking twin dials.
So at the rear, the first thing I want to check is the headroom, and it is a little tight. For me, it's just adequate. I'm 5 foot 8 inches and I have like a 4-finger gap above, but someone taller is definitely going to find, themselves brushing the top of the lining. The rest of the space, of course, is just fine. In fact, legroom is really impressive because this seat was adjusted for my driving position, and as you can see, there's ample amount of legroom.
There isn't a center armrest, but you do have AC vents and 2 USB sockets at the rear. And as for other features on the Fronx, it comes with bits like Suzuki's connected car tech, a 360-degree camera, ESP, and front, side and curtain airbags. On to the performance now, and while the Fronx gets the 1.2-litre engine from the Baleno with a manual and an AMT, the highlight is another familiar unit that also has manual and auto options.
So the Boosterjet returns. It was there in the earlier Baleno, now it's back in the Fronx. This time, interestingly though, it's coupled to a mild hybrid system.
And that is quite simply for efficiency.
If you have been noticing, a lot of turbo-petrols have lower efficiency in the real world, and that's because of a very peculiar thing called knocking. When you turbocharge an engine, the pressure and temperature of course rises, and therefore they can knock quite easily. Now to avoid the knocking, what they do is inject more fuel into the cylinder. And what that does is it lowers the temperature and therefore the pressure, but also your efficiency. Now, in fact, we have a very interesting article, if you do want to read more about that, on the Autocar India website. It's called The Truth About a Turbo-Petrol's Efficiency, and I will make sure we have the link to that in the description down below. Having said that though, Maruti claim 20 kilometers per litre for the automatic version of the Boosterjet, which is pretty good, but that's the claim. Stay tuned to our website, of course, where we will put this through a road test and get you the real world figures.
As for the claimed figures of the entire powertrain lineup, it ranges from 20 kilometers per litre to 22.8.
So what's the performance like? Well, put your foot down like this, the automatic drops a gear or two, and it does move off quite smartly and quickly. Now, Maruti claim a 0 to 100 km per hour time of 11.48 seconds for the auto and 11.4 for the manual. And what's really nice and interesting is that the manual and the auto are so close. So really, if you want good performance, but also the convenience of an auto for the city, you really won't go wrong with this. In fact, the Boosterjet engine comes with a 6-speed torque converter unit, whereas the 1.2 litre comes with an AMT. So I would definitely recommend the Boosterjet 1 litre because you do get a much smoother gearbox. The automatic gearbox also has paddle shifters, and you can take manual control. So for example, like right now, I can drop a gear or two. But what's really impressive and what I really like about this is that you can hold a gear. It will not second guess you. In fact, it will let you go all the way up to the rev limiter, which is 6,000 as you can see, and it won't upshift. Now, in terms of handling, into fast corners like this, it really feels nice and planted. It is based on the Baleno raised suspension, of course, but I think Maruti have done a good job in keeping the ride and handling as close to the Baleno as possible. Yes, you can feel it stiffer. So for example, right now we are on, well, an uneven road is the best way I can describe it. It's actually unpaved, work still going on. So you can feel all of the texture, you can feel the roughness underneath you, so you know it is stiffer, but it doesn't really crash and bang. So in that sense, it's really quite nice. In fact, we just went through a pothole, so it doesn't bottom out, and that's really something nice to have on a car like this.
And Maruti was nice enough to allow us to experience this to the full with a neat rallycross section, where I found the engine was quite willing, and thanks to minimal turbo lag, it didn't get bogged down anywhere. The suspension also took everything in its stride, and Maruti of course had some obstacles for us to get over to illustrate the increased ground clearance. And oh yes, there were plenty of turns where I really appreciated the manual handbrake.
Onto the manual now, where you can really feel the engine's characteristic, and it's a rather interesting one because Maruti seems to have taken the Boosterjet name quite seriously. There are two distinct boost points in the rev band. So if I floor it right now, at about 1400 there's a boost, and then again at 2.5 it kind of catches a second wind. So in that sense it's not linear, but it is quite entertaining. So the lethargy at the lower revs with the throttle is quite clearly a bid to improve fuel efficiency. Maruti have tuned it, I think, trying to balance the efficiency, something which is a hallmark for the brand. But I really think with the manual, they could have gone a bit peppier, a bit faster. It is a manual turbo direct injection engine after all.
And besides, there's always the 1.2 for those who want efficiency.
So if you are in traffic, you aren't really going to be complaining too much because the controls are all quite light. The gear lever, light, easy. Clutch too, light and easy. And the steering as well. It is a bit inert, not really feelsome in that sense, but in the city or, when you've got a lot of maneuvering to do, you're going to be quite happy. And what I'm really happy about with is, unlike many Marutis, this steering actually returns to center. So that's really something nice to see.
So, as you've probably gathered, the Fronx is certainly a very well sorted package. But does that mean it's also just a Baleno on stilts? Technically yes, but in reality no, because it comes off as something quite different and with character too. It looks very distinct, and while I wish it were livelier, the Boosterjet is still fun to drive, and with the raised suspension that can take a pounding, you can keep up the enjoyment over the rough stuff too. It will come down to pricing though. The Fronx will retail under the same roof as the Baleno, and Maruti won't want the Fronx stepping on its toes. But there's also the larger Brezza which it can't get past. So where should it sit? Between 7 to 12 lakhs would be a nice sweet spot, which also goes up nicely against models like the Kiger and Nexon. Over to you, Maruti.